Hi, this is the seventh in a series of conversations I'd like to have about death and dying. And this one kind of tags along to the right to refuse care. And as I said, I've had a chance to reflect now that I've been retired for a while, because when you're working in a hospital, the pace is so frenetic that you don't really have a chance to think. You just have a chance to react. And subsequent to retiring, I've had a lot of time to think about whether what we did was always right. And I'd like to talk about a couple of special circumstances. This is kind of thinking outside the box, but I'd like society to think about this. And one is when a person is demented and they have Alzheimer's. Let's say they have to be admitted to the hospital because they have pneumonia, very, very common, or another common one is they developed a urinary tract infection which led to a blood infection. Okay, and then we have to do things to them. We take them out of their familiar environment. They're even more confused. We have to do things to them, draw blood, start IVs, those kinds of things. And they're screaming and yelling, don't touch me, leave me alone, leave me alone. And for example, for a person with pneumonia, maybe we've determined that they've got pneumonia because they aspirated. So we put a tube down their nose so that we can feed them with the tube feeding. And of course, the first thing they do is they pull out the tube because they don't want the darn thing. It's uncomfortable. They don't want it. And then you put another one down. And each time you do it, they might have to go down to radiology to have it put in under x-ray so that it's in the proper place. And it might be $1,000 and they can pull it out twice in a day. Clearly they don't want that tube. And before I left the hospital, they finally found a way so that they could anchor it behind a person's nasal bone so that they can pull and pull all day, but unless they break their nasal bone, they're not going to pull that tube out. But in a way, I've had a chance to reflect and wonder if we are doing this person a disservice. But if they're still, even though they're demented, if they're really allowed to refuse something that they really don't want, because it would get to the point where, you know, they didn't want you to come in the room. I've had poop thrown at me. I mean, you get to, it's like knowing how many bullets are in a gun. How much poop do you think they have to throw before I can really safely go in that room? And you would go in with, you know, 3 or 4 people to, you know, hold them down, clean them up. You know, you'd have to maybe restrain their arms by putting on things so that their elbows wouldn't bend so that they couldn't pull out their tube, or so put on big mitts on their hands that look like boxer's gloves, but they're soft so that they couldn't pull out their tube. And you begin to think, at what point are we doing this person a disservice? They clearly don't want it. And whether they're demented or not, do they have the right to refuse? And the person who's making the decisions is across country. They can't see what's happening. And so, you know, the doctor might present it as, you know, she's pulling the tube out of her nose. We want to put it now, insert it into her abdomen. You know, and so again, it escalates. You know, you put it in the abdomen, then you put a binder over it so they can't see it. But ultimately, and if they, you know, have pneumonia and they've got an IV, they're pulling out their IVs. The antibiotics are giving them diarrhea. They don't like it when we clean them up. You know, at what point are we ignoring their obvious wishes just because they're demented? As I say, this is a difficult decision. It's just something I think we should be thinking about and talking about, because we carry on and we do a lot of things to a lot of people who I don't think want them done. Now, my second point, which is also going to, set society really talking, if anyone watches this, is if a person makes a suicide attempt that is likely to kill them or leave them maimed for life. I'll give two examples. We had one man shoot himself in the head in a public place, and he was, in my opinion, it was unfortunate that the very first person at his side was a trauma surgeon who happened to carry a mobile ER in his car trunk. And he was able to resuscitate this person enough so that when the paramedics came, they got into a hospital and they were able to keep him alive, and he was ultimately discharged from the hospital. But he was not discharged home. He was not discharged in a good condition at all. So here was a man who was depressed enough to want to make an absolutely lethal effort to kill himself. And we prevented him from doing that and left him in far worse shape than when he started. I'm not condoning suicide or saying, ignore all suicide efforts, because if a person just takes too many pills, you can pump their stomach, you can find what their issues are. It's becoming hugely apparent that a lot of depression is neurochemicals, brain chemicals, and you can do a lot of good things with medication. I'm not saying that we don't treat the cry for helps. We had, I don't know how many suicide attempts by 20-somethings who would get drunk and then they would do something, like stab themselves repeatedly with a box cutter, something that's not lethal, but something that says, I hate myself and I hate my life. And clearly those people you save, you fix, and you give them the treatment to hopefully improve their life. And I'm talking about another example was a man who shot himself dead on in the heart. And the trauma surgeon was quite pleased with himself for saving this man's life. And he said, gee, had I not been a trauma surgeon in the war, pick a war, any war, I would never have been able to save this man's life. But again, this was another individual that made a lethal attempt to kill himself, who was rescued from the brink and again was discharged from the hospital but did not make it home and was in far worse shape than he started out. And I wonder if a likely to be lethal attempt at suicide, jumping off a bridge or something like that, where you're going to end up in far worse shape than you started out with if they should not be allowed to succeed. And, these are heavy thoughts, and, I would like it to elicit discussion, if nothing else. But I hope you have a thoughtful day. Thanks. Bye.